this week, Alex has no idea what we're doing.
You can always tell a Frank.
You can't.
I've always said that. It is the pervading law of all things organic.
There's like a huge diversity of stuff that goes into the development of modernism and that can live comfortably in a modern interior. If you've been tuning into us, you know that these early couple of months of 2026 at Daniel House Club are all about modernism. And we learned last week, or a couple weeks ago, that Alex has a huge knowledge in that area. So I thought I would give him a pop quiz to see what he knows about the trajectory of the so-called modern house. I wanted to kind of focus on this for two reasons. One is just, we have clients all the time who have maybe an interest in modernism, but I think one of the big mistakes that people make is being really way too rigidly dedicated to that style, especially in the furniture. It's not cool if you go into a modern house and it's filled with every single piece that you find on the floor of DWR 10 years ago, or just like any old knockoff of some iconic mid-century piece. So I wanted to show that there's like a huge diversity of stuff that goes into the development of modernism and that can live comfortably in a modern interior. So with that, I'm gonna show you this first slide. Are you ready?
Yep.
Okay, this is what?
Germany.
No, incorrect. Okay, so the first slide is a picture of the interior of a house that is commonly sort of looked at as the beginning of the modern movement. And this is finished in 1860, and it is William Morris's personal home. Do you know who William Morris is?
Cigarettes?
Incorrect. You know who he is.
I actually don't. I know he's not cigarettes because that's Philip Morris.
Okay, well, it's a bunch of those iconic wallpapers from like the arts and crafts periods of the second half of the 19th century.
You mean the iconic ones?
The iconic ones, yeah, with birds and strawberries and things. This is like firmly rooted in the arts and crafts movements, where it's all about like the materiality of things and this movement toward built-in furniture and a little bit the idea that...
Is that piano thing built in?
No, but what you see something built in, right?
Windows, fireplace, and little stoops.
Yeah, those little stoops. I forget what the exact purpose of those is, but you can sit by the window.
What we call you.
A little stoop. Thank you very much. This is kind of the beginning of things. I think it's a little bit facetious to say that this is the first time furniture has been built into a house. It's definitely not. You can see it everywhere, but that was key to this movement and what the stuff is being built out of over like what's decorative. If you could think of a single quote that you've heard about modernism.
The one that comes to mind is, it is the pervading law of all things organic.
No.
That the life is recognizable in its expression, that form ever follows function. This is the law.
Yeah, no, that's not right. Have you ever heard someone say, form follows function?
Yeah, I have.
And what do you interpret them to mean by that?
The form comes before the function. That is the most important element to design. And I also think of the times you've made me stand in front of the Seagram's building and tell me about how it has I-beams on it when it doesn't need to. And that makes it look nice, but a lot of people thought it was wrong for a modernist to do.
Right, because it was too decorative. Would it surprise you then, hearing the phrase form follows function, that this is a photograph of a building from the person who is known to have, or believed to have first said that?
Clearly, they're holding it up. That's the form.
Yeah, those angels are doing a lot.
Yeah, that's structural. Is that right? Did I get it right?
No, you didn't quite. Although a little bit, because Louis Sullivan of the Chicago-based firm Adler and Sullivan is the first person believed to have said form follows function. And a lot of later architects and lovers of architecture have this idea that that means there can be no decoration, must be all about the function of a place. What he really was saying was, it's not about what the decoration is allegorically saying so much as this is the top of a skyscraper in Manhattan, and it is a tall, elongated building that is reaching for the sky. And that building, because it is like a column, needs to have a base, a middle, and a top, and sort of reach for the heavens. With that in mind, the whole building will sort of function as you might think that it should. Not really, this must be stripped of everything and be a sad box. Okay, so what do you know about this place?
Frank.
It looks like a funeral home
It
to me.
looks like it's wearing a really big hat.
So Frank worked for Louis Sullivan.
Ooh.
And this is his first commission after leaving Sullivan's firm. And what I want to point out here is this might have looked modern in 1893 when it was completed.
Very rectilinear.
But what do you see a lot of also? Rectilinear, yes?
Neoclassical elements.
Yeah, this is a super classical house. It is vigorously symmetrical. It has a front door right in the center. It has this pathway that marches right up to the front door. But it also has some things like a super exploded frieze. So the whole upper level, all those windows are in like a classical frieze zone. So you might imagine that the bottom and the bricks is like where all of the columns would be. He's just taken those away. So he's playing with classical elements. And I think that's really important to understand when you're doing a new modern house. There's a lot of underlying classicism there, and the people who are practicing early on understood that, and that's why they got really incredible results. So.
Surprising that more homes in Illinois and Wisconsin don't have a classical frieze zone.
You mean because it's so cold?
Yeah. Classically.
If you had a guess, where is this?
Germany.
You're close. This is
Austria.
Vienna.
Oh, got it on
And
the
I
side too.
think before we talk any more about it, we should look at the next picture. All right, this is,
Built-in furniture.
yeah, built-in furniture. This is the front of that same house. I think it's way more commonly photographed from the backside because that's the one that's super planar and has these like sort of random feeling punctuations into the wall where the glass is. But this is a really, again, sort of a classical facade. It has a stoop. You go into the front door. It has mostly symmetrical windows on either side of that. And this is, as I said, in Vienna, this is built in 1910 by the architect Adolf Loos, who incidentally Frank never met. But he did travel to Vienna and meet with a bunch of colleagues that Loos hated. But here, yes, you can see built-in furniture, so you're getting at that practical form follows function sort of idea. You'll see this even more in Loos's later work, but also it's really arts and crafts feeling inside, right? It doesn't have
you can
that
definitely
like
scrapbook in there.
yes, yes, that is a good spot for scrapbook. What about this place? Do you know anything?
I know that I really dislike it.
Anything else?
Nope. I don't.
Do you know what country we might be in?
Looks like Florida.
Yes, Florida is incorrect.
Chicago?
It is Paris. Well, it's just
Oh,
outside
that
of
makes
Paris,
sense.
about
The
20
ugly
miles
part of
outside of
Paris?
Paris. The ugly part of Paris. This is Le Corbusier.
Oh,
And
yeah.
this
I don't care
is
for him.
the Villa Savoie, finished in 1931, hated by its clients so much that they eventually abandoned it and called it uninhabitable. So, as you probably have heard, Le Corbusier's whole idea was this machine for living, which I think is really overplayed as the dominant feature of the modernist movement. But he had some rules for his houses, like they were all going to be lifted up like this. They're going to have a garden on top. They're going to have these horizontal long windows. And specifically, he's reacting against everything he ever saw before in architecture, except I think that's kind of insincere because while he calls these little sticks piloti, they're really columns from a classical temple. A classical house would never be divided down the middle like this, but everything else is kind of there, except that this is designed with the car in mind. So you can pull in under there and circle around and park your car in there, which is cool, but otherwise this house, beautiful but epic failure. Okay, do you know where we are now?
Are we back to Frank?
Yes,
You can always tell a Frank.
you can.
I've always said that.
You have always said that. Do you know where?
Oh, almost certainly the Midwest or New York.
Yeah, I actually never remember where this house is. It's super famous. I've actually never been here.
Me either.
Yep. This is
We have so
Bear
much in
Run,
common.
Pennsylvania.
Oh,
Yes.
okay. What is the gong type thing on the left? I want
It's
to
a
play with
cauldron. This is falling water. I just chose this picture because you know immediately otherwise. I also chose this because this is the interior of a world-famous modern house. And
that. So organic.
it's so organic, and there's not any chrome in the whole place, and there really are like two or really several more strands of modernism, and some do really follow that machine for living, and some really move in an organic direction, and Frank is always about this organic feel. I think this is really fun, and I show it because a modern interior can be warm and rich and diverse and cozy. Yeah. Now that we've taken you through the world of modernism a little bit, I think we should go visit Robert's apartment because he is a truly fantastic collector of modernist furniture and artwork. And although I have been trying to indicate that you can be kind of more free with a modern space, I think he's somebody who's allowed his space to feel really warm and welcoming, but still really strict and of that core modernist feel. So let's go check it out.
Hello, welcome to New York City. Welcome to our home. Our living room space is really our central focal point of the apartment. This has not only our living space, but also our dining space. In a New York City apartment, you kind of have to combine the two spaces. And the important elements for me in this room were the use of primary color, because our apartment is just basically a big white box. And a lot of our artwork is very colorful, but also utilizes primary colors as the primary means of displaying itself, which I really love. Myself and my husband are huge collectors of mid-century modern, not only artwork, but also furniture as well. So one of my favorite pieces in the living room are these aerated concrete sculptures. They're technically not vintage. However, they were made by Jonathan Adler about 10 years ago, so maybe they are a little vintage. And this is our primary room. So this functions, as you can imagine, being in a New York City apartment, it functions as both a bedroom, and it also functions as my office space, as well as book storage, which is super important. Thank you for joining us for our home tour here in New York. We bid you a fond farewell with a lovely view of the Hudson River.
Always a pleasure to tour that beautiful space, and we thought we'd follow that up with a couple of really iconic mid-century pieces from Thayer Coggin, and specifically the Milo Baughman collection. The button-up sofa, which I think is one of the more ubiquitous, maybe, pieces of the mid-century. So it's a piece that Milo designed in 1959. It's button-tufted, hence the name, and does have a really thin, tight appearance, and those sort of, I always kind of call them peg legs. Again, not really my personal favorite, but that leg style, but really part of this era. And I think it's a beautifully made piece and a comfortable piece. Alex tells me that the sides are too thin to even tolerate, but I think it's lovely, and you will too.
The button-up is not my favorite, but it has a great name. Like most things at Thayer Coggin, they are made well and named well. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about one of my favorites. I'm actually just going to tell you that it exists, because you can go do all the research on your own, because I haven't. It's called Crusin. It is a really cool, it's a chair, but it is like a pre-reclined lounge chair that Milo designed in the early 60s.
Yeah.
And
65.
it reclines you way back. I have sat in it. It has a matching ottoman. Very, very comfortable position. It is
Looks
not
great in leather, right?
Yeah, yeah. And still bummed that actually if you go to their factory, which you should do if you go to High Point, they have like a canceled order section that you can buy at really good prices. There was one of these in olive leather with like a soft bronze finish. It was really great at a great price. Did not fit in my place, so I didn't buy it. But now I really want it.
One of the key things about that chair that is cool is that it's pretty airy, even though it's like a really big, comfy chair. So it has like an open metal frame. So it does look really clean in your space.
To be clear, it's not like something I would probably put in a living room where you want to have a conversation with somebody, because you'd be leaning back like this. But in a library place, quiet place, or you want to read or have a high-mounted television, very relaxing.
In general, just shout out to Thayer Coggin, really beautifully constructed furniture. So much of mid-century modern furniture is made in Europe or started in Europe and is manufactured somewhere here. North Carolina is its home, always has been. It's a family-owned company that still really takes quality seriously, so much so that they actually will buy back original pieces and study them and make sure that their dimensions haven't shifted from the very beginning.
And they air dry their finishes, so they did it perfect without overheating it or making it crack or bubble in any weird, unnatural way.
Definitely specify Thayer Coggin in your upcoming projects, and we hope you come visit us again next week for the rest of the story of the development of the modern house, because we didn't make it quite all the way through. I got too excited and there was more to tell you.
Yeah, it was really exciting.
Yeah, I know.
This is Peter and Alex with Daniel House Club. We'll see you next week.